I'll call Finance Committee first. Akers?
Here.
Dobbins?
Here.
Milton?
Here.
Romine?
Here.
Simmons?
Here.
Yancey?
Here.
Mayor, we have a quorum. Next is Capital. Akers?
Here.
Dobbins?
Here.
Buckley?
Here.
McConnell is absent. Pinkley?
Here.
Skanes?
Here.
And Mr. Skanes is here as our alternate for McConnell. Mayor, we have a quorum for Capital.
Thank you very much. Regular reports.
We're going to do approval of the minutes first.
All right. I will add it to my agenda. I'm sorry. I didn't touch it.
That's all
I
right.
apologize. Joint budget and finance capital improvement. Committee meeting minutes of May 28, 2020. And who reads those?
Move to approve. I second to approve.
Motion been made and a second for approval. Any discussion? Any changes? Please vote.
Aye. Aye.
Monthly sales and tourism tax reports. Now, Jane.
Oh, boy.
That will be, Melissa will give that presentation.
Yes. All right, so we are in our second month of receiving tax receipts that go over the period that the city was shut down in response to COVID-19. So our June receipts were in the total amount of the 1% sales tax of $488,815. That is down 45.5% compared to the same month last year. And that puts our year-to-date sales tax receipts down 11.9% compared to 2019.
So I got a question. How many out of that number, I'd ask this question right, just didn't report, and we may see them up on this next month? Do we have a number that just didn't pay on time and they were moved forward?
I have not updated that information yet and looked at it. We can tell you that we've received more notices in the mail from the DOR this month as far as requesting us to go out and revoke their business license because they have been unpaid. I don't know specifically which time periods. The DOR is not very specific with us in telling us which time periods those go back to. The other thing that's happening right now, we are still renewing our business licenses, and typically this time of year what we see is any of those late tax payments or businesses that haven't reported. In order to get their business license, they have to update their information and get everything turned into the DOR. So we'll see that coming in over the next couple months. DOR is not always forthcoming with us about that information because it is private.
And they're very delayed. The DOR is very delayed.
Does that mean we have to make a friendly visit to those businesses individually? Is that what you're saying?
We do that, yes. Matthew goes out. He's not here yet, but he goes out and does that for us.
Been extended to August 1st.
No, sir. The licenses are supposed to be renewed already. We extended it a month, May 31st, so starting June 1st. The penalties and all those kind of things applied. If they don't have all of their items in that are supposed to be in, that's how that works. So businesses are really coming in and trying to get it taken care of, and we are working with them on some, but as of June 1st, I think we talked about it last time, it was in the minutes for the penalties to start assessing back into June 1st. But DOR is delayed. It causes us a little bit of delay, but we're working through that as this is a new thing for us and as it is for every business.
Is it improper just to assume that that number should have been a little bit higher? If
I would assume so.
Okay.
I would assume so, but, and I mean, if you look, I always like to look at the year-to-date here too, because if you go back and think about the COVID financial report, we assumed a 45% reduction for the entire year. So right now we're sitting at 11.9, and if y'all been, I know y'all have been paying attention to what's been going on in the city, it seems like we're booming right now, just from a visual standpoint. So I am hoping, I think that we're going to be able to trim that way back, that 45%. So assume the worst and only get better from there. I think that's what's going to happen. I'm thankful for that.
Thank you.
I have some input also. I know June 16th, my business received, I thought, a very ugly letter. I mean, it was saying, if you don't do this within 2 weeks, we're going to take your license away, and it's bolded and underlined. We're going to revoke it. And I took it was a certified letter. So when I checked with my accounting department, what they shared with me was they sent in certified letter, March's tourism tax. They physically came up in April to pay the tourism tax, and whoever was at the counter refused to accept it because what they said was March was not, they can't accept April payment until March is paid. So then my accounting person kept watching the bank to see when that March payment cleared so they could pay April. Ended up sending in April's certified letter, certified mail. Sent in May's certified mail, and we get a letter on June 16th that says, we're going to take your business license away. So as a business owner, I was really offended. And then I believe they were told that there was a stack of mail from March or April that hadn't been put into the system yet.
So if I might address that.
Sure.
Kind of knew that might have been discussed today. There's some discrepancy between what your staff is saying versus what mine is saying. One, we don't turn away anyone for payment. And so I asked all of our staff that was involved with that, and they said we never turn away anyone. Okay, so that is a discrepancy between your staff and mine, and I'm happy to work through that with you. The revocation letter, it's a standard revocation letter. We don't single that out. So yes, I will say there was 10 to 12 businesses that were sent a revocation letter that shouldn't have been because the stack had gotten lost on a desk, and we found it. What we did was we called all of those businesses. Most of them were zero returns. We apologized to them. We asked them to just ignore those letters, and then we drafted up apology letters to those, so you'll be receiving one as well. But that is a mistake that we made, and we came back and tried to fix it in that manner. We sent out 120 of those letters, and that's just standard protocol for us. We have had our city attorney look at that. The intent is not to be ugly or hateful, so I apologize if you were offended, but the intent is to be more direct in the manner of, here's the code, here's what we have to do per code, and here is the reasons why, and here's what we can do about it. A date will be set with you and the finance director so that you can come in and speak and just kind of give your side of it, and then it's a meeting between me and them, and then we talk about it, and then we talk about further actions. Most businesses, I will tell you in that manner, most businesses get everything taken care of between the time they receive the letter and the time that a meeting is set, so that I probably have maybe 1 to 2 meetings a month, if that. So it's really a standard protocol. It is within our code, and it is done for a reason, just so that we can make sure that order is followed within the business license realm. Unfortunately, you happen to be in that little 10 to 12 stack that got misplaced, and we are sorry for that, but we tried to justify and we tried to take care of it as best we could. But the discrepancy, I'm happy to talk through it with you. I addressed that with my staff. So
well, I threw a shoe at my office, and what I was shown was from the finance department, they were just claiming they don't have the money. So we sent in copies of the certified letters for March,
aware of that.
April, and May. Yeah.
And I was aware of the three. They told me step by step. So it should not happen again. But again, there was some delay because of March, April, and May. And there were several people in our offices that were processing those. Some of them, it's not what they do every day, but we all stepped in to try to pitch in to get these businesses up to date. However, we did miss those 10 to 12. Out of 120, we missed those, and that's kind of how we do make mistakes, but that's kind of how we were trying to rectify the situation. You should be getting an apology letter. We're supposed to send those out by tomorrow. If you don't, let me know, but we did make phone calls to every one of those businesses as well. it does happen. I'm not going to say it doesn't, but we do our best we have a 3 review check. So this one unfortunately just happened, and you are correct on that.
Okay, so, and for clarity, during the COVID shutdown, I don't think anybody from the finance department was furloughed or let go, so you had a full staff during that time?
No, I mean, many were working from home. And so it was pretty much myself and Stacy and Marcia that were in the office, and we were trying to process mail, and we were trying to process checks, and we were trying to process business licenses and liquor licenses so that we can scan them in and get it to the people that are working from home so that they could process, all while trying to keep up with our own. So we tried to adjust the best that we could for the ones that were in the office versus the ones that were out. No, they weren't furloughed. Our part-time staff was furloughed, but we have one. But nobody else was furloughed because we had more than enough work to keep them busy from home.
Yep.
I'm sorry, Melissa, I took over. I did not intend to. You go right ahead.
All right, so moving on, the next report is our 0.5% transportation sales tax history. It's going to essentially mimic, and so will the next report, the public safety sales tax to the 1% sales. It was down 45.5% for the month, down 11.9% year-to-date. Our public safety tax receipts were down 45.4% for the month and 11.8% for year-to-date.
Were those pretty close? I'm sorry, let me pull this back. Were those pretty close to the transportation? I didn't review that.
The public safety was 11.8, the transportation was 11.9. And if you
close.
look at it in dollar value, it's like a $6,000 swing between the two of them. So really have closed that gap. There's going to be a little bit of discrepancy between those two because of the beginning when the businesses, some of them may not have filed and those kind of things, but it is extremely close. So that's a really great thing.
Yeah, and you're going to see differences for a while.
Yep.
You would be surprised. I get tax payments back for 1999,
Yes.
2000. So, I mean, there are just a lot of times that we get tax payments for way earlier periods. So it's going to be a very long time before these reports actually
Would my
sync up.
question for the previous 1-cent sales tax applied in this situation, that there are some that are just tardy, and that's I'm not saying it'll pick up the difference of that 11.8%, but those are still being processed, and
I think it's a fair statement to say all the way across the board,
Okay.
especially during these times.
Yeah, and we'll have a much better idea next month. And I can go through, like I've done before, and given you the analysis to show you what periods we're missing. I would just expect at this point to have done it this month. There would have been a lot, and it's just, it's really difficult to
my
get a good
question went
idea
back
right now.
to it because when we were on the tourism board, we saw this routinely, that you'd see a low amount, and the next month it'd be clustered, and we'd go, where in the world did that come from? It was tardy payments. And I guess DOR has a cutoff date. If it's received that next date, it goes the next month.
And in the normal course of business, we saw that. So if you would be down 20% one month, the next month you may be up 26%. It's kind of a catch-up thing. With this year, it's pretty unique, but I still think you're seeing a lot of that. Does that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
On this public safety sales tax, I'd like to ask those in the room that are on the budget committee for us to come up with a way that we can, the budget committee is in charge of the oversight of this tax fund. And I don't have the comfort that being part of the oversight of this, that we, the committee, spend much time overseeing this fund. So I guess the question to those on the budget committee is, does anybody else feel that I would like to be able to look at the public in the eyes and say, yes, I'm on the oversight committee. Yes, we review financials. Yes, all the monies that came in. Yes, all the monies that went out like they were supposed to. being part of oversight, unless I'm misunderstanding what an oversight committee's responsibility is.
No, and I would argue that you are more than the oversight for just public safety. You're the oversight, budget and finance for the whole, all funds. And so I would hope that you would do that for all funds. We present the taxes as they come in. We give you the income statement for the month, and then you can see the year to date. We give you the balance sheet. We also give you the expenditures, anything over $15,000, and we give you that cash by fund report for every month. I also like to tell you, and I say this every month, so y'all are probably sick of this, but I give you a way that you can check us to make sure for all funds, but for this, you can always make sure that the income statement ties back to the balance sheet, which also ties to the cash by fund statement. So the income statement, you get an income statement in this package, you get one for every fund, including the public safety. And in that, it tells you your expenditures, it tells you your revenues, it tells you your year-to-date. It also gives you 2 other years to do a comparative analysis on those if you want to. It gives you the ending fund balance by month. And then what you can do is you can take that fund balance and then you can go to the balance sheet for the same fund. And you can look at that balance sheet. That balance sheet tells you cash, it tells you receivables, payables, liabilities, those kind of things that are out there that don't hit the income statement. And then it gives you the fund balance. So the fund balance is your tie. So you can tie your fund balance from the public safety fund back to the balance sheet. And then on the balance sheet, the cash number on the balance sheet, you can go to that cash by fund report. I know I'm being repetitive, but I'm trying to help you see. Then you can go to that cash by fund report and look at the cash that we're reporting to you on the balance sheet to justify that the cash by fund is on that, and then we tie that back to the cash in the bank. So the one thing I'll tell you is with the general fund and with the public safety fund, as we have addressed in the past, there's minor funds associated with both of those. So the difference in the fund balance is going to be the beginning fund balance, and there's minor funds for general fund, which is courts, and our security. Those are the 2. And then the one for the police, I got to look this up because there's a few, so hang on one second, and I got that for you.
Well, Jimmy, I think, and I appreciate that. I mean, we're getting top-line information, and we can tie the top-line numbers together.
I guess I just didn't know what else I could do to help you with that.
Well, there again, maybe I'm confused of what an oversight committee is responsible for. And maybe I'm thinking about this wrong, but I'm thinking that the expenses that go out of this fund, the budget committee should know what's being paid out of each one. Where's the money going?
Okay.
Does the budget committee, does the oversight committee know that if let's say there was an error and $12,000 was paid to landscaping and it shouldn't have been part of this fund? There's no way for us to know that, yet I feel responsible being on the oversight committee.
The way that you can know that is when we have the audit. There are restrictions and there are guidances for special revenue funds that the auditors will address. So when the audit is done and they come back to you and report, hopefully, that they are free from material misstatements, that's how you can be assured, because it's a third-party audit firm that is completely independent, and they have to be. So that's how you can assure that those kind of mistakes did not and have not been made. Short of that, we give you the disbursements now over $15,000, and they are all described and all of those kind of things. So you can go through those, and you can ask those questions.
On those checks, you're referring to the checks that are presented to the board for like 3 months at a time?
No, if you recall, if you'll look in the disbursements we presented this time, last meeting we went through that, and so it used to be that we presented over 50,000, excuse me. We changed that, and this is the month, if you're looking here, it's over 15,000, and it gives a detailed description of every expenditure over 15,000. For the board, we also changed that it doesn't necessarily have to wait on the Finance Committee. Now we're doing all the disbursements, which starts, it could be 29 cents, it could be all the way through, and we're doing it on a monthly basis, and instead of waiting for this committee, we're just sending it to the board. So you shouldn't start seeing the 3 months. It might take a month or two to catch up, but once that is, we've already started that process too. So right now, you've got anything over 15,000 that you get in my opinion, a very good description on what that check was, and that was expenditure. And then the board gets to see everything, and we're doing that more timely within the month. So is there something, I mean, as a committee, I'm open to hear what y'all want. Anything different, we'll be glad to help you out with. But short of that, what else would you like to see?
Larry, could I ask Bob Simmons to speak to the issue?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I can't see hardly anything because when I put my glasses on, they fog up this morning for some reason. But I think one thing we're leaving out of this is you also include a budget number on this every month. And as a guidance to us, not as a set thing, but as a guidance, you give us the percentage of funds that should be through that year, so you tell us about what it should be. Yes. So that doesn't give us absolute detail, but it does give us a way to see that if that percentage is way off, or if it's up, maybe even $12,000, we would spot that.
Absolutely.
Why is this higher than it should be at this time of month? And,
Yes.
and then you would be able to answer that for us.
Yeah, good point.
So the budget is where we really approve the expenditures. Is when we approve that budget, and we do see pretty detailed items on that budget, then that's where we approve those expenditures. So we have that budget to look at every month. We have the percentage that's been spent. We have the exact dollar amount that's been spent. And I think this $15,000 lowering that amount that we see in finance will be a major help as requested. And so that'll give us a little better feel that we're not seeing anything that's material that isn't going past us, not only when it's budgeted, but also when it's paid.
That's correct.
And so I think we get a couple months of getting used to that and looking at it, we'll have a lot more confidence. I think that'll be a huge help to us. So,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
Anything else? Anybody else? Okay, Melissa, once again.
All right. So we'll move on to our tourism tax history. So what we received in May was a total of $145,920. That is down 80.5% compared to the same month last year. And year to date, that puts us down 35.3% compared to last year.
Melissa, I'm sorry. And so my screen did. So what is that? So the April and May, April was down 72, May's down 80. Mm-hmm. Is that reflective of March and April numbers?
Yes. So the way
that one runs about 30 days behind? Or
yes,
60 days?
yes. What happens is on June 1, we run a report for our tourism of everything that we collected in May, which would be for our April returns. Yes.
So I know some of these are like 60 days, and this one I think is 30 days.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, because we collect it in-house, so it's a month faster than what our sales
Thank
tax
you.
is. You're welcome. And then the next report here, we have the breakdown by business classification. You can see that we were down in all classes, which is not a surprise given the environment right now.
Which report are we on? I'm sorry, I was going into the details.
Well, I started with the tourism tax history, and then I
Ma'am.
moved to the second tourism tax receipts breakdown by
Page
business
8.
classification.
By business class.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And I'll move on unless there are any questions on that one.
Let me study it just a minute. Again, I asked the same question. Do you think that applies, my assertion earlier on, that there are some that just didn't pay, and we'll see those reflected in future months?
Again, I would assume so. Like I said earlier, we are doing payment plans. We have tried with the April and the May extensions to help. Now, we do have a really long list that we're getting through, and Matt's already started going out to businesses and those kind of things. But if you think about that, we sent out 120 revocations, give or take the 12 that were in the error. That's still a pretty good chunk of businesses that we're having to go out and talk to. So you can assume that in this report as well. Does that help answer your question?
Mr. Simmons?
Could we kind of broadly assume that this might be the low point? When we see June, we'll see pretty well half a month will be wide open. The other half will have much more business than we had in May. Wouldn't you think this report is possibly a low point, that we should see improvement? We'll still be down, but not like this report.
I think that's extremely accurate. We've been talking about this. So this is April. So yes, certainly we started opening back up in May. You'll still see numbers down, but I think we're going to start to come back up, and which can be a positive thing. Assuming that we don't have another shutdown and some economic downturns. I know that's what that's assuming, and our crystal ball is clear at the moment. So, but that's what yes, I would assume maybe it's only up from here, but I hesitate to say that too loudly just because you never know what tomorrow holds. But yes, certainly.
And I commend you for following through on these, the ones that haven't come in and all, and I also commend you for sending out an apology letter. Everybody makes mistakes. And I think that just puts a personal face on the city that we apologize, this wasn't correct, and we've now corrected it. So I thank you for doing that.
You're welcome.
Okay.
We need to turn the air conditioner back on again?
Well, it might just be me, so.
All right, so our next report here is the rolling 12, where we actually take our sales tax receipts and put them back into the business activity month. So you can see right now that our March receipts are down 43.3% compared to March 2019. Next month, I will update with April receipts. Just know that that very far right column, that will continually change as we receive more payments in from the Department of Revenue and can update this report. On the second page here, this shows us our annual growth rate as if our year ended March 2020. So right now, we can see a decrease of 3.6%. Again, that number will change as we receive more payments in from the Department of Revenue, and we will continue updating that throughout the year.
Just a point of clarification, I think this is what you said before, that we actually budgeted for zero base money from March till
July.
Okay.
So, and what it did was it calculated the entire year's percentage of revenue down by 45%.
March through July. Thank you.
So to quote Stan, you can always do better than zero, right?
I say we're up. No, you're down.
All right, our next report here. I'm sorry?
I was saying back to his corner.
Our next report here is our 1% sales tax monies that are not restricted to payments. So you can see for the month, we saw a decrease of $347,000.
Wow.
Year to date, we've seen a decrease of $500,000 in 1% sales tax receipts. The second page is going to be the same report, however, it's going to be based on tourism. So you can see for the month that we saw a decrease of $532,752 in unrestricted sales tax or tourism tax receipts, and year to date we are down $1 million compared to last year. The final two reports here are going to be our 1% sales tax receipts compared to our monthly budget. So we were down 46.8% for the month compared to what we would have expected to receive as compared to our budget. And year to date, we are down 10.1% for our tourism tax. We were
Melissa,
down.
just a clarification, that's our pre-COVID budget.
Yes. For our tourism tax receipts, we were down 82% for what we would have expected to have received in May, and we are down 34.9% year-to-date. And that will conclude my report, unless anyone has any additional questions.
Any comments? Next, we're to go to financials.
Certainly. We'll start with the general fund, and I will move through these pretty quickly, so if you have any questions, please feel free to stop me at any point. The general fund revenues, 8.9 million versus last year at 9.5. We are down, and that shows that through the taxes. Our expenditures at 3.2 in comparison to last year's at 3 million. So there were some debt service that didn't get changed, some of the charities, all of those go into the miscellaneous revenues expenditures, and keeping in mind, we did give raises and we had some health insurance increases as well. $7.3 million for the fund balance as of May 31st. One point of clarification is we have that note down there with the minor funds. Courts and the safety fund are the two minor funds that go into the general fund that are wrapped up in that beginning balance. So that difference will be $52,876.
Could I ask for a point of clarification?
Yes.
Because I've had people ask me.
Sure.
The monies are transferred, out of general to public safety, but they're not transferred from public safety back to general, correct?
That's correct. So we, the 7.6 million, that is what is budgeted to go over to police.
Right.
We divide that by 12, and monthly, we did reduce that by 25% per the COVID, so you'll see that in this number, okay? But we still divided it by 12, and we send that money over.
Thank you.
Jimmy, for clarification, under other financing sources, the first line is operating transfer in from safety or other, and it's $1,767.
For 2019, that's for 2019, 1767. Stacy?
That's the safety fund, that's not public safety,
That is the 104. That's the safety fund. We have a safety fund where we get credits and money back from the insurance.
Not the public safety tax.
Not the public safety tax. Thank you, Stacy.
Thank you, Stacy.
Any other questions on the general fund? Okay. The next one is the public safety fund. Revenues are at a little over 2 million. They were at 2.3 last year. One of the items that I want to bring to your attention is if you look on the 2019, the actual revenues, they had 166,135 versus 10,839 this year. There's a big difference there. Last year we got the SAFER grant, which is the grant that paid for 3 of our firefighters, and that was the last year for that grant. And we were able to assume them into our operating budget as a result of the tax. So that's the difference there. Kind of want to highlight that for you. The other thing is on the expenditures, 4.3 million this year so far expenditures versus 4.9 last year. You'll look, and if you see the difference in the fire department, 2.7 versus 1.7. Last year we paid $1,075,000 for the fire truck. So that's will skew your trends there. So if you know that, it'll help you do a little bit more comparative analysis there too.
Jamie, why the large increase in jump in interest income?
Because we started investing it a lot more. So we started investing that this year quite a bit more. So what we do is we have a standard amount that we keep in our what I call clearing bank.
Okay.
For our bills. What we do every year is we estimate the largest month of payments, typically in a normal year, that's July. We keep that in our bank over here. Everything else goes to our investment bank because we have such a higher yield earning, and some of it gets invested, some of it stays liquid. Our liquid is still higher than what we would earn at our clearing bank. So we've tried to be really diligent by fund to invest those and watch those very closely so that we can earn as much money as we can for the investments.
Is most of that the reserve that we set aside?
We do. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we invest the reserve, and some of it stays liquid. We have an amount that stays liquid and for all funds in the event that we need to do a drawdown, or we have like a natural disaster and some things happen. In the event that we need to do a drawdown, we can do it in 24 hours. So it's a
Back
fairly
to
quick turnaround.
Part of Larry's question, how much do we have in reserve? That's,
For public safety, right now, it's a little over 6 million.
Okay.
But if you look on your balance sheet, it'll show you, we'll go to the balance sheet real quick so that I can direct you there.
okay, what page is that?
I don't have page numbers on mine. Do y'all know the page number? The balance sheets are right after the cash by funds. The public safety, the cash and investments in the bank account are 5.2 million.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you. Page what now?
40.
Okay. This is going to take a minute.
Just a comment, during this time when we froze expenditures, I think Stan and his staff and Jamie, they all wisely saw that we weren't going to be spending some of the monies because we stopped them, and those have been put into investment, so that's why you're going to see that interest income increase like it has. And we'll see some additional increases, but as the year goes down, you won't see as much.
Especially with the interest rate.
Mr. Simmons?
Thank you, whoever pointed out was page 40. That'd have taken me all day long.
Just a side point, I know we're very limited in what we allow them to invest in, so we try to have as low a risk as we can. Have we suffered any losses during this market downturn in these first 5-6 months? And up and down, I guess, not all downturn.
Right now, we haven't suffered losses, we just haven't suffered as much growth as we wanted for this year. Does that make sense? So our investor that he came to y'all a few months back, I believe, before the COVID and stuff, he contacts us weekly and we have discussions with him weekly. I assume there's going to be a few losses, but what he does is when he sees that, he'll pull them out or he'll talk to me about what do you want us to do with this? I think in the next month you'll see a growth and get that back and those kind of things. He always sends us a report about what's going on in the economy and for nation versus state. He's very diligent with that, so I have faith that he's monitoring that very closely.
And we limit him to low-risk
Yes.
items. But
He
still
has our
everything
risk
is second
policy.
hits.
Our risk policy was written really strictly with the state guidelines. He has our risk policy and our investment policy, so he knows what he can invest, and he's audited against that as well.
Who actually makes the authorization on those funds? It's staff? Can he make that authorization to move funds, or does it require the staff to do that?
No, we can do that, the investment policy, but we bring that to you, I believe, annually to approve. So we'll probably, we'll bring that around, I think, October, maybe, give or take, when we usually bring that to y'all. But we can go through it thoroughly so that y'all can have a little bit more of a comfort level of what we do and why. And I already asked Patrick, our investor, I'd like for him to come back twice a year instead of just once, so that in the beginning of the year and towards the end of the year, y'all can get a little bit more comfort level and really ask him the ins and outs and what's happening there.
COVID has greatly distracted us, and so otherwise we would have probably been asking these questions in the last 2 or 3 months,
Yes.
with the volatility of the entire market.
I think you would have seen it go way up had it
But
not.
COVID just took all of our attention.
Yes.
Jamie, I'm sorry, let me get that.
That's
Oh, so you can hear me. So there are guidelines around public entities that have to be followed for investing.
Absolutely,
correct? And then
yes.
on top of those that have to be followed because they're the law, then we can go in and set some additional guidelines that we want to follow around safety and all of that stuff.
Yes.
So that's
Low
that's
risk.
what you give to
Yes.
the investor. So and that's what we review
Yes.
as a finance committee, as aldermen, and we agree on what we put in place. But there's federal, there's mandates,
Yes.
there's laws that have to be followed when it comes to what you can and cannot do with governmental funds.
Yes, absolutely. And it's usually low risk,
Right.
really low risk, treasury, CDs, those kind of
Very
things.
different
Market,
portfolio to look at. than
Absolutely.
what Mine would be
yes,
to look at.
yes,
Thank you,
can't
Pat.
take tax dollars
Right.
out and just willy-nilly say, hey, you know what, today I'm gonna play the stock market.
It's always
Oh.
very conservative.
Yes.
Sure. And then we come in and we say, hey, we want to make it even more conservative, less
Yes.
risk or whatever, less risk tolerance or whatever. And so that's what they follow. Okay.
In fact, we've had a lot of different municipalities ask for our investment policy and our risk policy to use to help them out. So we're thankful for that. But yeah, that was put into place several years ago, and we just keep rolling it. So certainly.
I remember looking at
Yeah.
at the sheet when, before we were doing that, and then the dollars that
Yes.
started coming in.
Yep.
It's made a huge difference to the bottom line.
Quite a big jump. And I would err on the side of being conservative there.
Yes, we know. So,
Well, I think Stan hit on it too, is that we do not have much to do with the equity markets, basically.
Very good, yes, absolutely.
I
Yeah,
think that's wise to point that out so that the public understands that, really.
certainly.
Jamie, just for clarity, the monies that we do invest, those stay separate per fund?
Yes, the special revenue ones do. So like, we have a savings account, and you'll see that on the cash by fund that encompasses a lot of funds. Tourism tax is separate, public safety is
Okay,
separate,
thank you.
certainly. Any other questions right now?
Next.
The Convention Center is next. I want to hit some highlights on that because they're going to be talking here in a few minutes. Obviously, we know their revenue is down quite a bit, and their expenditures are also down. So the revenue's down around $800,000. I'm going to approximate those numbers. And their expenditures are also down around $650,000. Okay, so while the revenues went down, they also cut their expenditures quite a bit as well, with the swing of about $150,000 there. And also, for them, right now, I think is a good segue. I wanted you, if you could, and I think you said the balance sheets were on page 40. The Convention Center also has a balance sheet, and I'm going to say it's on page 41 or 2 because it's close to the one we just looked at. 41, okay. But the Convention Center, if you want to swing over there really quickly, I want to show something to you all. It's been ongoing. We've had this for several years, but I want to point it out because I think it's a good segue in a few minutes for what they're about to present to you, okay? So if you look at the Convention Center balance sheet, you're going to see at the very top on the asset, the cash reserve funds city held. That's not a new thing. We've separated that out years ago when we made the transition from the management company, okay? So we got, I think, $204,000 that was paid to us years ago as a result of our assets, okay, when we switched management company. I'm going to paraphrase a lot of this, but instead of assuming that into the general fund, what we did was we put it into a reserve on the city side for the Convention Center. What they have is $129,262 left of that, because if you recall, we gave them a $75,000 payment earlier this year out of that. Okay, so I want to let you know that on top of what they're about to request and they're about to discuss with you, there's a little bit of an additional amount that, were they to need it, it's always there. I don't recommend drawing down the fund balance. I don't do that, but in times like this, I wanted to show you all. It's always been there, but I wanted to highlight it this month as a result of there's a need. There is a need there for them, and this is there in the event that they need it, okay?
Jamie, just a real quick question. Line number 3, petty cash, $13,000. Is that true petty cash?
True petty, it's cash on hand, typically, yes. But that's just for this month, and we report that out of the reports that we get from the Convention Center. So the process there, Brian, he's really good about sending us those financials on the 7th of every month. They do a really quick turnaround, and he sends us the financials. What happens is we have 1 to 2 accountants in our office that review them, ask the questions. We gave a checklist. When I first started, I created a checklist back in 2008 of all these reports that I wanted to see, and they have really kept that up. And so they review those, they ask the questions, all of that kind of stuff that gets worked out. And then what they report to us, if we're comfortable with what they reported, we report it because they are a governmental fund. So we have to report it on our side as well. So just so that you know the process, I know some of you have sat on the Capital Committee, and since we have combined those, I just wanted to share the process and how that works so that you can have that comfort level. And then when we're audited, they are audited separately as a governmental fund as well. So our auditors come, they won't come this year, it'll be all electronic, but they usually typically come and they do a separate couple of days audit and go over there and go through their items as well. Yes.
I don't know if they've contacted you yet, but what the convention center is going to be asking for today, I believe the airport is going to be asking you also. So
Sorry, Stan couldn't quite hear all of that up here.
The Taney County Airport, yes. So what he said was what the convention center is coming with us today. They're fixing to make this presentation for you all today. The Taney County Airport gave me a call yesterday, and I have that on the director report, but it's a really good time to mention that, to just say they have made a request as well. The $10,000 that we typically give them, it's more for assets and capital needs, and it's a reimbursement in nature. They have made a request that we look at that and for this year allow them to use that for some operating funds. I don't have a problem with that at all, and we'll be bringing that before you. It will be a change in their contract, so it'll take us just a little bit of time, but what he told me is that they didn't really need it until August, so we had a little bit of time because I explained to him the process we'd have to go through. Is that kind of what you were wanting?
yeah, I
Okay.
just want to make it's kind of similar.
It is similar. It's similar in nature, and we have a lot of that going on right now. And I think the best thing for us is just to be a little bit understanding about what's going on and try to help as much as we can without hurting our operations as well. So it's a fine line there, certainly.
Is fixing to a technical term?
Oh my, I'm so sorry. No, that is my southern.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I wouldn't be me without it, but I try, and sometimes those things slip through. Mercy. Okay.
Any changes you would make to that contract would be similar to the other things we're doing. They'd be one-time changes. They're not something that would change the contract in 5 years from now. They could just spend that for whatever they wanted to.
I wouldn't recommend that. I would recommend a one-time change like we're going to be bringing with some other things. And so I'm going to have to work with Chris on how to do that according to their contract.
Ready? Are we ready to move to the tourism sales tax fund?
So yes, and I'll try to do it a little bit quicker.
What page?
Okay.
Going back to the income statements, tourism sales tax fund, revenues versus expenditures, 2.1 million this year versus 3.3 last year. Obviously, we know tourism tax is down, okay? And then 2.2 million in expenditures versus 5 million last year. Obviously, our principal and our debt payments are down, but I wanted to tell you the marketing for the convention center is according to the taxes coming in. So while they had a budgeted number, we did reduce the COVID, per COVID by 45% because they are tax generated. And on top of that, we can only reimburse the chamber for their marketing dollars as the tax comes in. So we have a spreadsheet that guides us when the tax comes in. This is how much we can reimburse them for this month, if that makes sense to you all. So you're going to see a large fluctuation in that this year versus last year as well.
Excuse me, Jamie, on the marketing funds for the chamber. Do you have what numbers at pre-COVID, what we are anticipating providing the chamber for marketing funds, and with the revised budget, how much we're anticipating?
Certainly, if you look at that line on the tourism is on the, where it says just tourism, on the tourism sales tax income statement. That's typically your gauge for the chamber marketing funds. So there's the budget versus the actual, and then there's last year. So I was referencing, I typically, when I'm going through and doing my analysis, I always look at this year versus the previous couple of years, simply because we are a heavy tourism and there's so much fluctuation, which is why we did that budget report years ago, so that you can kind of gauge that yourself. But that, if that helps you, we look at the budget versus actual, certainly we do, but we also look at this year compared to last year and the year before to try to gauge kind of operations and how it's doing.
Quick question, sorry, Larry, go ahead, bud.
But the 2019 budget that's in here, this budget was pre-COVID,
Yes,
right? So the chamber was anticipating the range of somewhere in
yes.
dollars. Do we have an updated number with what we know today?
I do, and I don't have it with me at this moment, but I can get that to you all, and I should. It's in the financial update, but I will get that for you because I know you need that exact number, so certainly that's not going to be hard for me to get that for you.
The number on the far right corner of 2018 under tourism shows 0. Should that not show the actual amount from last year?
That can be timing versus when they submitted for reimbursement.
Okay.
Certainly. And we have that. Sometimes we'll receive very large packages. It's always going to be a timing swing too. Sometimes we'll get large packages of a whole bunch of things, and then we have to go through it. We have to determine marketing versus not marketing. What they do is they give us a detailed package of, here's the invoices that we paid, here's the check, copies of the checks behind them that we paid, and the detail. And then one of our AP accountant goes through those, makes sure that there's no non-marketing expenses in there, and so it's a process, but it could be timing, sure. And you know what, I'll look back on it because you'll be able to look through those financials and see when those occurred. Sometimes they'll submit huge packages, and sometimes they'll do it monthly.
You have any more, Larry? Mr. Simmons wants to, are you finished?
Well, I was just going to follow up on Bill's question. I think he was asking about the 2018.
The tourism line where it says
Tourism,
0.
yes. Oh, so that would have been the timing year to date.
Next month, probably it'll catch up.
You will see it. There'll be a huge one period month because we don't get them. It's just they get them when they come.
So it actually came in. Mr. Simmons.
If I could, I'm not so interested in the dollar amounts of this as I am the procedure. And this is kind of a worse nightmare in that they can't spend more than we get in, and we can't give them more than we get in. That's all really up in the air now. So what is the procedure? Their tendency, I would think, is going to be when they see the opportunity, they're going to want to hit the advertising hard. They're going to try to get people back in here, which is exactly what we want to do. However, they could easily outrun the funds that are going to be available. So how close a watch, how well are they keeping us informed on this? Because I feel we're probably the regulator on that, not the.
Correct.
Yeah.
We are, and I just talked to John about this morning. It must be a topic out there going on, but certainly what I told him and what I will tell you all is that they call our AP accountant Sunday who watches that, and she will typically let them know, here's where you're at. They'll submit it, and we will say, we can only pay this much, and so we'll hold on to the other submissions until the taxes come in. We have to regulate that pretty closely because we can only pay 25% of what we have coming in. So we have a model and a spreadsheet that we use to tell us what comes in, and then they work together. The finance with the chamber versus the finance with us over here, they work together to work that out. So they should have good communication. They'll call her, she'll call them. Again, it's not, I would say, it's not timely as far as month to month versus quarterly. They do it when they need it.
Well, I assume that they will be making buys ahead of time, like they'll soon be, if they haven't already, be buying for Christmas. Well, we don't know what the income's going to be by then. We hope it'll be back up close to normal, but we don't know that by any means. So.
They will have to go off of the 45% reduction when they're planning.
Okay.
They've adjusted their.
Yes.
They've adjusted their
Yes.
budget for the remainder of this year. They pulled back on marketing, and a lot more social media type thing and different and stuff. So, I mean, they are aware.
Yes.
I mean, they know they can't spend it if it's not coming in.
And certainly if it comes in higher than what we've anticipated, which I fully expect it to, they will have more money to spend. Unfortunately, we can't tell them that at this time.
Right. Bob, let me address that with you a little bit. At the end of the year, when I reviewed the tourism tax from the tourism district, they were up about almost $500,000 of what they expected to collect. So they've got a little cushion over there.
The TCED will help come in and fill some of that gap.
They may be leaning on that. I guess that's an
we-
improper assumption, but
I'm sure they'll do a great job of this, but we also have interim management over there, and there'll be a search for new management. And so I think we need to help them all we can.
Absolutely.
So that we don't foul up both of us accidentally.
And I think we try to do that every year. I think we have a very good working relationship, and we have had for a good 5 years or so. So I think we have a process in place that works. Again, this year is kind of anomaly, we hope. And so we will certainly make adjustments there if needed. No problem there.
Thank you.
Any other questions before I move on from tourism? Transportation, 2.1 versus 2.2 last year. Our taxes are down. As far as revenues go, our expenditures are also way down. So if you look at our revenues coming in, our expenditures have also decreased quite a bit. And so our ending fund balance for that fund is $2.6 million. I will, unless there's any questions, I will go through the, yes, sir?
I'm sorry to go back to that.
That's okay.
But, back to what Bob had to say, and it raised a question on mine. Do we have any carry-in money from 2019 on tourism tax?
So how that works is after our audit is done, then because there are client entries and those kind of things that we have to account for. So after the audit is done, then we will be bringing before you the carryover dollars, and then it goes to the board, and then we release that. And they typically put that, attach it onto their next year's budget.
Okay. Thank you for answering.
Certain. So the debt service is just the debt service, and so capital projects fund, I moved past the debt service, the capital projects fund, there's $848,000 in there. Not much is going on in this fund this year as a result of COVID. We have stopped all ongoing capital projects at this time. Parks and Rec Fund, for revenue, they've got $327,560 versus $610 last year. And then they've got total expenditures of $722 versus $872. And I believe you'll see this fund come back quite a bit with the business, just eyeballing that and talking to Cindy and Jason a little bit. I'm positive on this, but obviously they took a hit as a result of COVID, but they do a really good job of managing theirs, and I think you'll see that come back. And keep in mind, on that fund, we also reduced the subsidy by 25%. So not only is operationally they're taking a hit, but the subsidy as well was a 25% reduction. So you'll see that, okay? And then the water sewer fund, if you don't mind, we'll keep moving really quickly so we have time for the convention center. The water sewer fund, if you'll look at that one, the revenues are at $3.3 million versus $3.1 last year. If you look year-to-date actual intergovernmental, there's a $242,000 235 line item that is quite a bit larger than last year's. If you'll look at that, what that is April 2017 flood FEMA money in the amount of $229,000. So when we say we work with FEMA and SEMA quite a bit, we're still getting money in from 2017, so it takes a while. We're very thankful we got that, right? So they needed that. We're thankful. But sometimes HUD and FEMA and SEMA and CDBG and all of those state agencies, it takes quite a bit of time to get some of those processes
Do those
through.
funds still stay restricted to this fund, or they can't be moved to any other fund? They're
Correct.
Restricted?
Right. So we have to do projects. We have to create projects. We do that within our office. We manage those projects. We have to file for FEMA and SEMA. We have to work with them. And then we have to do quarterly reports on the updates of the projects and all of those kind of things. And then when they start to close out those projects, they'll give us the remainder of the funds. It's a lengthy process, but sometimes the funds come just in the exact time that we need them, so. And then what I will say about the water sewer is we attached the water consumption. We have updated the water consumption reports quite a bit. And what I will say to you is we started presenting those along with the licenses, reports, and those kind of things. Just because all of these things are the things that we do in the finance department, it's not just finances, and I thought that maybe because you are our oversight committee that you wanted to be able to see the comparatives. Now this consumption report is a really good gauge for you as far as the revenues, and if you remove that $230,000, then you'll see a swing there. We've actually gotten less than we did last year, but keep in mind we had a 2% water increase and a 5% sewer increase. The consumption is down, so if you look at the consumption being down and the rates, it all goes back to gauging of the water and the irrigation consumption being down, and obviously if our city's shut down for a given point in time, the consumption, it just only makes sense for that to be down. So I kind of like to draw your attention to what we look at and how we analyze things so that you have the ability to do so as well. So if there's not any more questions for that, I'll move very quickly through the other.
Real quick
yes,
question.
Certainly.
What percentage of consumption were we down?
If you look on the consumption report, I believe we're down 45%. Water, let me go to this.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, there you go. It's in your packet, 2020 versus 2019. For water, we're down 45%. Water and irrigation, 47%. And then on the next page, you'll see the consumption. And that is the consumption for irrigation itself is down 68%, and then the consumption for just sewer is 35%. So if you look at those variance columns, you'll be able to gauge that, and then look at the financials to say, does this make sense?
It's tracking.
It's a reasonableness test. Does it make sense, and is it tracking?
Well, it's tracking along with revenue.
Absolutely. Certainly. So the next report that we have, I'm jumping all over the place, Melissa, thank you for following me. For the next report we have is the cash by fund report. We call this our Bob Simmons report. And it's years ago, but it's been a really great report, and he's the one that requested it, and it's served us very well. So operating fund balance, this shows you, this is our savings account. These are all the funds that are wrapped up in the savings account and the cash balances. It also shows you the reconciliation and what's in the bank. Kind of gives you some assurance that what's in the bank is what we're reporting in funds and vice versa. So that's the point of the whole cash by fund. And that's why I always tell you, if you want to give a check to what we're doing, always look at all three of those reports and make sure that you can flow them all the way through. And that should give you some assurance that those are accurate. Now, I always tell you to ask me questions because we are not free from mistakes. So certainly ask all the questions you need, okay? And then the balance sheets, we've already kind of gone through those quite a bit. So I will just stop there and leave it open for any questions that you may have about any of those reports.
Any comments or questions?
Well, it's just a general fund in toto that we're holding basically online for what we projected with zero revenue versus what our revenues actually are. We're tracking right on line of what you expected.
Yes,
what
and
I'm getting.
And a good gauge is that is our sales tax. We always look at that because that's our largest income for the general fund. So certainly, what I think we're doing a lot better than what I anticipated, and I'm thankful for that. And I will tell you, we always anticipate low and expect to come in better. I think that's just the best way to do it. You don't want to anticipate right exactly what you think, otherwise it could go the opposite way, and you don't want that. So that's kind of the way we do it and why we do what we do.
And we're appreciative you do it that way.
Thank you. And I don't know if I answered your question, so.
No, I think I think you did.
Great.
Again, when you project zero growth for 4 months, I think that you guys did a wise thing there.
Thank you. It was a combination effort. It wasn't just me. It was John and Stan and Chris and myself sitting in this conference room in here looking through things and talking it through. And some of the best meetings that we've had, even though it was in a stressful situation, I will tell you, those meetings I enjoy doing because it's a group effort. And I am very serious when I say this. It was a group effort, and everybody listens to everybody else's expertise. And I just think that's the way it's supposed to work. And those were great meetings, and I was thankful for those.
Teamwork. Mr. Simmons.
I'd just like to make a comment. I appreciate your informally referring to this report as my report. Obviously, that's not true. One of the pleasures of sitting for a length of time on a committee or anywhere, any board, is watching people in that organization start and grow in their positions. And at the time this happened, Jamie had just come on board. And I knew we had a great person because there were things, particularly on the coast, both coasts of cities like Los Angeles, having funds and everything balanced, and they were audited, and auditors didn't ask for anything like this. And they would show up that, yes, there was a fund and it was balanced, but there was no money.
Right.
There was no money backing that fund. There was no fund in the bank. And so I asked Jamie, how was it possible to balance that every month? And she quickly answered, yes, it'll take some work, but yes, it should balance every month. And nothing's as easy as it sounds. There's always the little things and the other little funds that make it hard to balance, but they should balance, and they do balance.
Absolutely.
And she sat there and figured that out. And now then our sales tax, I've seen a few months of that report and a couple of years here, and we've seen great improvement, and we get great insight from our person that's sitting and doing that. And to watch people grow in those positions is part of what gives me confidence in our accounting, is that we have a good group, we have good leadership, and we have good people doing a job that they continually grow in and get better and better at. And there's probably not many people in the country better than you are, in my opinion, as seen by the number of times you're asked to go somewhere and speak to somebody else. So,
Thank you very much.
We appreciate that, and therefore the leadership in getting this budget in this time that's totally unprecedented anywhere by anybody, that's paying off, for us. So we appreciate the work all of you all are doing.
Thank you. It's really nice to hear, and my staff is why I'm able to stand up here and do this. We have an incredible, knowledgeable staff that's growing with me, and I am extremely thankful for them, and I'm glad that they're getting appreciated, because I think sometimes you work a thankless job sometimes, and they need to hear it every once in a while, and a lot of them are sitting in here today, but it's not just me, it's all of them, so thank you so much.
Would you go on record in stating that you didn't provide any financial remuneration for my colleague down here saying nice things about you?
But he is the chairman of the Jamie Club.
I did not, but I'm extremely thankful for that, because we respect his decision. Yes.
Well, you look at other things too that we don't talk about very much, but and Jamie just quickly referred to the auditors and looking at the convention center. Well, none of that stuff was set up when the convention center came online. And there was really no bookkeeping. The accounts we were getting at the time were from a national organization and designed for a hotel. And that has very little to do with a convention center. And so it took a year or more of Jamie going down there on an almost daily basis to understand and decide what we needed and to get those reports to where we could look at them and have confidence in them. And so just there are numerous things like that we've built upon here that we sometimes overlook and forget how much more precise we are than we were yesterday.
That means a lot. Thank you. Those were some late nights.
Yeah.
I don't think I could do that anymore. I'm aging.
And if anyone should know here, it's Mr. Simmons, because he's been here
Yes.
during that whole process.
He's been with us all the way, so I'm very
And,
thankful.
I believe that he knows what he's talking about.
Yes, absolutely.
There. Jamie, do we need to go through the balance sheets then?
I just kind of roughly went through those. If there's any questions, I like to tie them back to the income statement as I'm talking about it and show you and kind of direct you there. If you would like for me to go through those in detail, I'll be happy to, but I was trying to save a little bit of time so that the convention center could present.
Does anyone on the finance committee have any questions or comments in regard? As she shares, the balance sheet figures should tie back to the income figures. You should be able to validate balances. So the information is here.
And if you don't understand something, or if you just need validation on something, ask me. I like questions. I don't mind the questions whatsoever. It just shows that you're looking at it. So we appreciate it. It's a lot of work.
Is there anything you want to bring to our attention? Because I do know we're running short on time.
Well, I wanted to bring to you, what I've already brought to you is that balance sheet for the convention center, the amount that the city held, and I think I've already highlighted that, but I wanted to bring that, we report it that way so that, for transparency, so that you can see there's a difference, but I want you to keep that in mind going forward. I think the convention center has been hit hard by COVID, and I think they need some assistance, so I just wanted to share that with you as well.
So Mayor, I'm very comfortable with passing on the budget reviews and give the convention center the time they need.
Alrighty. Do we, no other comments on the balance sheet in regard to the convention center? Do we ask for their presentation now, or?
Well, really quickly, I wanted to, we can go through these. These are just for your information, these next reports. Like I said, the licensing reports and the liquor licensing reports and the consumption reports, all of those are just for your benefit. We started adding those several months back, but we wanted you to see what's going on in our department, what we're processing, the new businesses versus the renewals, and those kind of things, just so you're kind of up on everything that's going on in our city. So yes, we can move past those very quickly. Those are just for your information. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me.
Yeah, we've already referred to the water consumption figures and data in these reports. I'm impressed with the thorough, comprehensive covering that these financial reports give us, not just the figures that are there, but background and some information on the assumptions that are being made, the planning that's been done, and I appreciate that very, very much.
Thank you.
It's a job well done. If the Finance Committee has no problems with us moving on and getting the convention center so that we can get them on
Could
their way.
could we get an approval of the disbursements or acknowledge of receipt, page 61 on the disbursements?
Okay. All right.
Real quick, and then I'll turn it over to them if you don't mind.
This would be that the committee approves passing on to the alderman for their.
Acknowledging receipt of, yes, sir.
Yeah.
And this is, if you'll look, anything over 15,000, this is what we were talking about earlier. It used to be 50,000, and we had the request last month for 15,000, so this report's gotten quite a bit longer, but we try to give a really detailed description, check number, vendor name, all of those things that you can see, and feel free to ask any questions about those that you have. We're happy to help there, too. Under 15. We are, because it's a project, so like specialty air, if you combine them all, yeah.
Actually, the list is not very long because of not a lot of activity.
Well, what I mean is it's going to get a lot longer when the activity picks up,
Yes.
so just heads up.
You see the major items there. Any comments or questions in regard to the disbursements?
I have, Jamie,
Yes, sir.
and I think this is what I was feeling and referring to earlier. For example, we're looking at this, and we're going to be asked to be acknowledging this.
Uh-huh.
But just one example, the last item on the first page, on page 61, security bank card is $125,000
Uh-huh.
for May 2020 expenditures.
If you look over to the next page, we give you an over $15,000 report of the security bank cards. So things that were bought on the P cards that are over 15,000, and in this case, we did less than 15,000 just because it's all a part of the same project. Okay, so I wanted you to see all of that. So if you look at that, those are the largest expenses. The
So
rest of those are, I'm sorry,
So
go
it's
ahead.
these three the federal signal.
Those are all, the ones over 15,000, that was all a project. Now, keep in mind for that, those are grant funded. So those are EMPG grant funded, so we'll get some of that money back. But because they're expenditures, we still wanted to show it to you all.
Okay, and I think that was just an example of where
Sure.
I'm trying to stay caught
Yep.
up, because I'm looking at the total amount is 125,000, and the only description is for May 2020 expenditures, and then when we go to the three large ones only total $23,000.
And that's because those are P card expenditures, and those are all budgeted expenditures, and a lot of those are very small dollar amounts. So the P cards used because we encourage the use of the P card because we get 1.39% monies back into our account for those, and we appreciate that. So we encourage them to use it for all of their budgeted expenditures, and we review all those expenditure reports every month. So that 125,000 reflects all of the expenses. So on the next page, we bring everything that's purchased over that money to you, over the 15,000. As you'll recall, I know Ted Martin brought this before the board, and so you'll be able to reflect back on that. That's why we do that. If we were to give you an entire report of all of those, you would see some really small dollars, and it would be a very large report. And I know y'all don't like to see those 100-page reports, but this is why we do what we do. So anything over 15,000 that's spent on a P card, while we address the P card expenses here, we also turn around and give you that there for your benefit. If that's helpful, I don't know. Sorry.
Yep.
Would it be, I know you have to, and I'm not sure how our accounting software works, but is this something that could be exported into Excel?
Yes, I believe it is. There's multiple expenditure reports that we go through every month. It would take some time if you want to see all of those. It would take some time, but we could probably consolidate some of those. I think we could probably print a report within our Century Suite system. I'm looking at Pam just because it's Arvis, and I'm just thinking. But we have a Century Suite system that we keep all of that, and then it gets exported over into our operating system. So I can work with Century Suite to see if I can get a report. That way we don't have to do all the work. It'll take some back and forth, but certainly I don't mind. But keep in mind, all of this is budget expenditure driven, and when we do the budget, we send the whole entire board out every detailed line item so that you can be assured that when we're reporting, that's why we report over 15,000 to you, because you've already approved all of those line item details in the budget process. Just let me know.
Thank you.
Okay.
Is there a motion or approval to forward this on to Alderman to approve?
So moved.
Acknowledge receipt? Bill Skanes made, there's a motion down there. Bill, you want to do a second?
I'll do the second.
Motion and a second. All in approval say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other items here? We got the consumptions report, we got the RFB, RFP report.
Just the convention center is next, I believe.
Okay, all right.
I'm in pain.
Yeah.
It's not limping, it's straight up pain.
Just Spain.
Good morning, everybody. How is everybody doing?
Good.
Good. So I first and foremost, before I jump into all of this, I want to say that I'm extremely happy that we are in a convention center in a city that is open and operating. Right now, after talking to many counterparts, there's a lot of centers that don't have business till September. There's even some convention centers that might not see business till second and third quarter of next year. So I think this kind of makes sense why we're looking to do this. We are ahead of the game. I was on a conference call the other day with 10 counterparts, and 9 of them were not even operating right now. They're still in a scenario where they're in different phases of opening and reopening and doing all that. We fortunately have already had 4 events. Just to kind of break this down, we've already had 4 events. I have 8 events upcoming within the next 30 days. The month of August, we have another 8 events. In September, we have 15 events. So we are operating. The flip side to all that is we had to close down for a couple of months. We had to run the facility with a skeleton staff. We furloughed 23 managers. I laid off 70 people. Basically, we ran 7 days a week with 5 people coming and going, early shift, mid shift, night shift. So just to jump in, I think I can read off my paper better than here, but what I'm proposing, it's a summary request to utilize our capital reserve. And I'm going to jump right into our key points. Obviously, the loss of business due to COVID-19 has severely impacted the cash flow of the convention center, like many other centers nationwide. Despite taking extensive measures to cut costs, reducing our expenses over 50%, obviously, like I said, furloughing our staff and laying off individuals, we're looking at additional funding will be needed to have since we've been empty for a few months. We have reopened, we're holding events. We just got completed with stage 1 dance group. Anywhere from 3,000 to 4,000 people came to town. Hotel activity, restaurant activity, shopping activity, convention center activity. So it was a huge win for, obviously, us, for the city, and everybody a part of that. Obviously, we're feeling these cash flow issues. Funding is a challenge, but however, there is about $541,000 in our capital reserve. The purpose of the account is to have funds available for capital improvements of the convention center. But in this time of this economic downtime, we propose using some of these funds, obviously, to reopen the facility and make sure that our events continually go off without a flaw. The other thing out of all of this is by having our skeleton staff in the venue for the last 5 months, by reopening, we're working on reopening by bringing additional staff on, by having the ability to buy product again, all of those things. During this 2-month of, let's say, quiet time, our facility was not affected by any type of riots, any type of looting. I also have talked to many general managers in my world who convention centers have been affected by that. So not only do they have to think about reopening and utilizing monies from their capital reserves, what they're doing, but they also have to now repair their venues. you know, just talking about the simple nature of trash cans and rocks and bricks thrown through windows, multiple windows. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars to their venues that they have to, in addition to bringing back online their staff to do functions, they now have to pay this money. The good thing is our staff, the crew that we had on for the last couple of months, we had 24-hour coverage, making sure that none of this happened to the venue. The one thing that really did came up that would have been a major problem was we had a major pipe burst, about 3-4-inch pipe burst. And if we had nobody in the building for that, that would have caused significant damage. The good thing is we did have a crew in there. We were able to seal it, fix it next day, and move on. So right now, we're just looking at continually reopen. The challenge right now is that we can no longer pull off 3,000 person events with 5 people. It just doesn't work. And I don't want to get us into trouble where we end up start rebating money back to clients because we're not able to provide the services that the center should be providing. I don't want to let down our hotel partners. I don't want to let down our retail partners, our restaurant partners. And I think right now, we're just looking right now with that $541,000 in that account, we're looking to borrow $240,000 to continue operation of the venue. Obviously, paying bills, bringing staff on to service events, buying product, food product, cleaning products, and basically your day-to-day operational needs of a convention center. And that's the request that we're putting in today.
All right, Mark, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions or discussion from the Finance Committee?
Mark, you addressed some of what my question was going to be. Since this is capital reserve, by using these for operational needs, are we robbing Peter to pay Paul in case we have future improvement needs to be made? I mean, by your assessment, we're okay right now.
At this point in time, yeah. We've also talked through this process with that. We're leaving $300,000. There's going to be no capital projects. I have another spreadsheet attached in there. There's no capital projects for the rest of 2020, and there's none on the books right now for 2021. That'll allow us to build up that capital fund back to where it needs to be. So the only thing that we may have to utilize if there's any type of emergency capital, but we still have $300,000 in there. So we should be perfectly fine. And we've also talked through this where there's that threshold of that 200 to 300 that we don't want to go below in general. So we always have some funds to operate out of.
How long would these $240,000 allow you to do through the rest of the year, or just a startup?
That you know, right now the whole thing is, again, I think Jamie hit on it right now. Unless there's some type of downturn and the functions come for August, September, October, November, December, we are in a better shape to continually operate. I can't say that we may have to draw a little bit more, but my goal is to utilize these funds to be in good shape, and then to get us back up with the revenues coming in from our events to run off of those monies.
Any other questions?
I have a few. Mark, I know you're asking for the 240 out of the capital fund. What's your thoughts about not requesting that out of the cash reserve funds that the city is holding right now, the 129,000?
I think the 129 would be a start. The 240, I think we went a little bit higher on that. We want to start taking down our utility bill, which is a big piece of this. So every month we put out about anywhere between $15,000 and $20,000 in bills that we pay. And we're paying about $5,000 to the electrical company. We're probably going to use about $40,000 of this 240 right off the bat to get us caught up with the utility bill. That's why. So I kind of went on the higher side than the $129,000 in that account.
So is it the 240 plus the 129?
No, it's just the 240.
So, okay, so what you're really, okay, I guess another way to look at that math is it would take the reserve fund basically down to zero, and we would be taking So you really, yeah, if that went to zero, we'd be looking at $140,000.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Jamie.
You don't care, let me
Yeah.
speak to that. Those are two separate pots of money. So the 241,000 would come from the reserve, and then we would have that 129,000 that's separate city reserve held for them in the event that they need it down the road. So just so that you all are aware, I'm thankful that they're keeping the 300,000 in there, and then they're just asking for that 240, knowing if you look at their balance sheet and those kind of things, what they're up against. And then we have that 129 for the future if they need it, that they can draw down that amount too. And as I said earlier, I'm not a fan of drawing that fund balance down, but we put that in there for their use for times like this. So if it means anything, my recommendation would be to absolutely approve that 240 from the capital, and they still have that 129 in the event that they run into something else here in the next couple of months that they need it, they can draw that down as well and still maintain that $300,000 balance in their capital. Because as you know, what Mark already said, I didn't mean to take over for you, sorry. But as you know, what Mark already said is that convention center is getting older, right? So we've got to make sure that we maintain a capital reserve. But right now, we all feel extremely comfortable with what they're asking. And I just kind of pointed out that 129 we still have. In the event that they need more, they can draw that down as well. That's just my recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. I guess I was just looking at it a little differently because I know the building is getting older, and that there still are uncertainties out there we're going to be faced with.
Certainly.
COVID obviously just brought everybody to their knees, for sure.
Unfortunately.
But in my mind, when COVID happened, and this was clearly unprecedented, that would be the time when you would go to your cash reserves and use it, because that money was put aside for the purpose of what if something happens? And something happened. Versus, it's like Bill said, it's just feeling like we're robbing Peter to pay Paul, because we're going to need these capital improvements. There's no doubt about it.
No question, I agree with that. But what I was trying to point out to you is that they have more than one pot of money that is available. So they're not trying to draw down the capital reserve. They are keeping a healthy limit there. And then they're going to, once they can start back, they'll start refunding that or replenishing that. And on top of that, they also have the 130-ish that they can draw down in the next couple of months. Because essentially what they're having to do is start up again. And so startup is expensive, and they've got bills that they've got to pay. So they've got to take this $240,000. They've got to catch themselves back up, and then their conventions start coming in. They're going to start replenishing that, but there's always a gap that they're going to need to have. And so if they have that 129,000 there, they can draw some of that down as needed to help replenish that offset, if you will. I don't know if what I'm saying is helping you, but what I'm trying to say is that 240 is greatly needed. It's way more than the 129 that they have. The 240 is greatly needed right now to help them reboot, if you will. That's my words. But also that 129 is there because they're going to need it in the future to help them draw some more down, and it's there for that purpose.
We're actually setting up 2 emergency reserve funds.
Absolutely. That's exactly the good way to put it.
Do it without having to rob Peter to pay Paul.
That's what we're trying to do, yes, to assist them, because they are our convention center and they are a great source for all of our businesses when they bring those convention centers in. So it behooves us to help them in any way we can so that we can bring more business to town.
Larry, both Mr. Simmons and Rod, are you finished with what you had, questions you had?
So my only question
No, but
Pardon?
is, so then the 129 can actually be approved to use as capital improvements.
Yes, sir. If need be, it's a cash reserve. Yep.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question. What was
The
it?
129 can, in the future, be utilized as capital if needed down the road.
Certainly.
Rebill.
Process request.
That 129 is.
Mr. Simmons, then?
It's not restricted, so you're right.
Jamie, before you get away, normally when we pull a reserve down, we do have to have a plan to replenish that reserve. And I know this is a time when you can't have a plan for everything, but how do they replenish that reserve?
The reserve on our side or the capital reserve? Which one?
The capital reserve.
Okay, yeah, that's a little bit tricky because that 4%, according to the contract, monthly, 4% of their revenue comes out and it goes into that capital reserve. So monthly, they're putting in 4% of the revenue that they earned into that capital reserve, which is a shared account between the city and the convention center. So that's the way they would replenish it. However, as we said several times, the convention centers don't typically operate in the black. They typically operate in the red, but they're so beneficial for other reasons. So if you recall that $260,000 that we budgeted to give them to kind of offset their losses every year, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to look at kicking that up in the next couple of years to help them replenish
To be able
that.
to get back.
Yes, sir. That's exactly what we need to do.
Thank you.
Yes.
Jamie, would you,
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Jimmy, would you also recommend that, because we're operating in somewhat of a vacuum, we're talking about this item, and we never did get to follow up with pre-COVID when we were talking about the convention centers their budget, their losses for this year. So wouldn't we want to have that conversation to get a big picture of, okay, what is it really looking like for this year before we start moving monies out of different funds other than using the cash reserve fund?
Well, I don't follow that same logic, and here's why. Because this capital reserve is a shared cash fund for both, and the process for this, the use of this capital reserve is not through the budget process. It is through, they have to bring it back before this committee and request it because this committee serves as their oversight committee, just like all the other funds. And so they have to bring, anytime they want to use this capital reserve money for capital, this is a typical process, they have to bring it and request it before this committee. This committee talks about it and allows them to use it for that purpose. So it's really not a part of their budget. They have to do that anytime they want to use any of that money. And they've used it in the past for like IT equipment and a lot of the things that they've needed. So that's why they brought it back before you today. It's not really part of a overall budget discussion because the budget discussion is about their losses. This is more about, okay, we have a need. They have a large need, and what can we do about it? So these are some ways that we all got together, John and Mark and Brian and myself and Tracy, we all got together and we talked about some of the ways that we could come up with helping them out, which didn't hurt the city, so we weren't expending more of city dollars, and we were helping them out at the same time. And this is a solution that we all came together on because it wouldn't draw down any more city funds, city general funds, and it would help them out, knowing that in the future we're going to have to start contributing a little bit more to the convention center to help offset that. So I think it's a twofold discussion, but it's not one that would have to go before the board because it's a shared, and really this reserve is on the convention center side, and that's what this committee is for.
Okay, I also think it's fair, though, that there's a reason we put,
Go ahead.
okay, there's a reason we put that 4% aside, because we know, I mean, we're going to be needing those dollars. And
True.
so I guess I'm looking at it from the city side, that we own that building, and that building's going to require capital improvements. And I just feel uneasy today, even though I know we're going through this crisis. It's like I said, I'd much rather use the monies that's set aside for a crisis, which is our cash reserve fund. That money is set aside for the whoops and don't know, versus using the capital improvement money that we know we're going to need to spend. If we spend it today, the next board, the next couple boards will have to be replenishing that fund when we have capital needs over at the convention center.
I understand your thought process, and I think that's why it's important to understand that they're not drawing and they're not asking for the whole thing. They're asking to keep a good solid 300,000 in there and only build upon that. They understand the capital needs better than any of us, and I get that. I mean, in the past with the tornado, I could give you history and all of the things, and that's why we have insurance and we had to go through all of those things. And so I understand that thought process very well, but I think it's important to remember that they're keeping a good solid 300,000 base in there for that reason, because they know that capital. And what Rod said earlier is we have that 129. 129, unfortunately, is not enough. If we were to draw all that out and draw it down to zero, it's not nearly enough to help them, and I'm going to call it reboot for a lack of a better word, to help them reboot and get started and bring more business to town. That's not enough. We had to come up with another idea to help save the city funds and help save the convention center funds. And this was the idea that we came up with. And it wasn't just them, it was us working together to try to come up with a plan. So they do have that 241,000, and I'm going to recommend that you approve this just so that they can start moving forward. I will tell you from my perspective, I cannot speak for Brian, but this time on financial people has been a tremendous pressure. And I can't imagine the pressure that has been on the convention center watching their financials, and we go through them. I look at them too. Watching the financials and watching what they're up against has even been worse than what the city itself is going through, because not only are they in the financial crisis, but they are also in a business operational crisis as well. And we have been blessed to see more and more people come to town. Now it's their turn that we give back to them, knowing that they're going to maintain a $300,000 reserve. We're thankful for that. Let's let them have that $241,000, knowing we have a little bit of cushion on our side to play with too in the event that they need more. I just think it's what we said, I think the other night, is we're partners working together to try to come up with an unfortunate solution that we've been dealt. So this is the solution that we came up with to try to offset some of that stuff.
I'm not disagreeing one bit about we need to fund it because the convention center is so important to our community. I'm just questioning robbing Peter to pay Paul.
I understand. I mean, I do understand your concerns.
We have the $129,000 in cash today for that purpose. So
it's simply not enough. It's not even close enough.
So what if it was 129 for that cash and take 110,000 out of capital reserve?
I mean, I think they're going to need more than that. I mean, if you look at their financials.
I have a question from Mr. Scott.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I mean, it didn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out. My question was, does the contract allow such to be undertaken in 50 words or less?
Yes.
It can be done. It does not have to go back to the board. It's done through this process. That's what I'm trying to
It's done through this committee right here. This committee has to approve it.
Okay, my last question is, somebody who's dealt with government accounting, I've never been allowed to zero out an account. So you couldn't draw down that whole 129,000.
That's what I was getting ready to say. It would be very unwise to do that.
That would be an audit exception.
Well, keep in mind, this is not, that 129 is not their entire fund balance. I would never come before you and recommend that you draw down a fund balance. That 129 is over and above. That was a reserve that we put in as an extra reserve. And if you look at the balance sheet, you'll see the difference. But we put in, and honestly, we didn't have to, but it was the switch over the management company. We put it in for their purposes because we thought in the future they're going to need it. So that's an additional amount over and above. It does go into the fund balance, but we separated it out so you could see that that's money that's available.
What's the process of them doing this now? Do they have to submit any other documentation to the city? Is all the proper documentation been provided?
You guys approve this. That's the process that goes through. They can move forward tomorrow, pay that, and I'm going to tell you, we're their oversight. Our department's their oversight. We watch that. We're not going to, they wouldn't do this either, but they're watching it pretty closely.
I'm just trying to look at a time frame. By the time they request
They'll be able to pay their bills tomorrow.
Okay.
From a
It's
procedure,
their money and they hold that cash.
All right, I got you.
from a procedure standpoint, this is the Finance and Budget Committee that will be voting,
Yes,
and you want us to make an actual vote,
yes, sir.
okay? So I'll need a motion from a member of the Finance. and
Excuse
Budget
me,
Committee.
I had another question. Is that okay?
All right?
Jamie, just real briefly, if you can, that second line item under assets, cash and investments in the bank account, 600,000. It's on
Is it on ours or his?
our balance sheet.
Oh, let me grab it.
Which balance sheet?
Okay,
convention center.
616,000.
Yeah. What is that money? Where is it? What is it used for?
That's the convention center money. That's the cash and investments that they have in their bank account. And like I said, they're a governmental fund, so we take from their financials and put into ours. And that cash reserve is not recorded on their financials because it's city-held cash. That's why I tell you that's the difference. So this 616 and all of these liabilities and those kind of things that you see, those are all their financials. After we do a mini audit on their financials, we ask any questions that we need just to determine the value of those financials. We put them on our governmental fund, and then that 129 is over and above what they're reporting to us on their financials because that's city-held dollars. All of the rest of this is convention center-held money. That's the difference.
Okay, so where is that 600,000? Is it an investment fund?
It's in the convention center accounts, yes.
And we wouldn't-
And they hold those monies and they manage those monies.
And
The
so,
129 is on the city side. And you can see that if you look to the cash by fund report. One way that I just kind of wanted to draw that connection for you. If you look at the cash by fund report, you'll see on the operating fund balance for the savings account, you'll see their fund is 120, and you'll see convention center, and you'll see 129,261, and that's it, because that's the only monies that we hold on the city side. All of the rest of it is held and managed by SMG on the convention center side.
and so we wouldn't take the 240 out of the 616 because of,
Right, because that's their operating account, and that's the monies that they have to operate with. And they're already, if you look, their accounts payable on that balance sheet's 472.
Larry,
You'll
I'm
draw
going
that-
to put this as simple as possible. If you took any of that, you would be bankrupting the convention center,
Right, I mean, just,
if that would help you understand it.
Oh, boy.
there's 600,000 cash sitting in an account, and if you took 240,000 out, it would bankrupt them.
That is
How?
their operational cash
That's what I'm trying to
forever,
show.
ongoing, to pay all their bills and everything. We shut them down.
We don't want to shut them down.
no.
We did, but we did. We shut them down for a 3-month period. Because of that, they've lost a lot of money. This is a solution to use their money to bring back into and pay their bills and get caught up. To take 129,000 of city money out of that account and take it down to zero would be also a second, not an intelligent move on the city's part, because it's a secondary reserve should something else happen. And it provides the funds available for what you're talking about. Quite frankly, if you look at their capital plan, there's nothing critical on there they're going to need money for in the next year or so. If they do, though, they'll still have their 301,000 available and that 129 for if we run into a second wave. So that's where it comes to. Whether you like it or not, what you were proposing would technically bankrupt that operation.
If you look at the balance sheet, they have accounts payable. They owe $472,000. That's what's on their accounts payable. So you got to offset those two as well. That's exactly goes back to what Stan's saying. So that's kind of why we came to the conclusion of what can we do to help both parties. Again, I'm happy to answer any questions, but it is my recommendation.
I'd like to get a motion on the floor to approve the use of the $240,000 from the capital reserve fund to be used for reopening and operations of the convention center.
Motion's been made. Need a second?
Now we can
Second.
discuss.
Now discussion.
Is that an accurate amount? I heard the word a little earlier, 241,000? Or is
That's
it-
what they're requesting.
Okay,
Now, the request says 240.
It's 240.
240.
okay.
Was that your fee, the 1,000?
No.
All right, the motion's on the floor. Any additional discussion? Members of the Finance and Budget Committee voting,
Aye.
please vote.
Aye.
I've heard ayes. Is there a no vote?
No.
There's one no vote.
And I'm
Believe-
voting no only because I'm concerned about reducing the capital reserves. I know everybody in here knows we're going to need those capital reserve monies. So I think it's putting the city more of a risk. The capital reserves there are there for a reason. People don't make up numbers and say, let's just throw in an abundance amount of money into this account. So there's a reason the capital reserve account is set up, and I think it would be a mistake to draw those funds down.
Mr. Milton, your point is made.
We really control that capital reserve fund. We set the 4%. So what goes into that is up to the city to do that. And that's one reason I asked that question about the plan to replenish that fund, because I think we should be fully aware that there will have to be either raised percentage or there'll have to be other funds made available to go into that capital reserve to replace these funds. But right now, we need them, and a 300,000 reserve is sufficient beyond this, and so over time, we should replenish those as quickly as possible so that we do have those funds.
Captain, you need to go.
No,
All right.
I would be here.
The motion's been made and approved. I think we are ready to go to the next topic.
Thanks, Mark.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah.
This is just it's like a positive thing that came out of all this. Obviously, we run on economic impact. So over Memorial Day weekend, we had the Cornhole Championship. We brought probably 500 people to town. The funny thing is then we ended up getting a 100-person lunch from Springfield because their parameters were not allowing. So we also got a 100-person lunch same weekend. But what came out of that was this Friday and Saturday, we now have a country dance event because of the cornhole event, bringing probably 200 couples to the convention center. And on top of it, they have courtesy room blocks at the Peachtree Inn on Friday and Saturday night, both for 50 rooms. Like, that's the economic impact, and that's the stuff that would be hard to turn away and say, hey, listen, we can't help you. So not only you have the hotel, you'll have the restaurant, you'll have the center, you'll bring probably 400 people to town for Friday, Saturday, and then Sunday they finish with a religious service, and then we turn right into another large dance group, probably another 3,000 people. So thank you for everything, and obviously this is much needed. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Are we ready to go to the project status report? Is that where we are?
Yes, sir.
All right. Shouldn't take much off.
This is just a report. I bring this to you every month so that you can see if there's any movement, any financial movement on these reports. Pretty much has stayed the same, very minimal amounts. 20.7 million for the Highway 76 revitalization, and then 12.8 million for the downtown, and then the 2 million for the water for the Highway 76 as well. So if you combine the two, the Highway 76 revitalization, to this point, we've spent 22.9 million and 12.8 million on the downtown. Okay, so that's really what that shows. We're going to adjust that report to add the CID and those kind of things as we get that up and running again. So you'll start to see some movement. Hopefully, maybe by the end of this year, first of next year, because the CID has been passed, so annexed in. So we're thankful for that.
Jamie, I have a question.
Certainly.
With regard to the capital process, right now we're shut down. Do you have an idea, like I'll use an example, Mike's got a tower going in out by Shepherd of the Hills. with a major water system upgrade. When will those be turned on, or what were the criteria that allow us to say, okay, I think we can go ahead with some of these projects? And are you seeing that nothing's going to happen before this fiscal year, and it'll definitely be next fiscal year before we start any projects? I'm just trying to get a feel for.
It's a good question. It's a very good question. But it's not really my call, but the physical health update took out all those large capital dollars. So if we want to stay within the ramifications of that financial budget that we presented to the board and several others within that fiscal health report for COVID, we need to not do any of those capital projects this year. What we're going to do, I caught myself. What we're going to do is we're going to, July 10th, in my director's report, I was fixing to mention this, that we're going to ask that y'all come back together on July 10th and rescore those capital items and go through that process like we've done every year with priority-based budgeting, and we're well on our way to doing that. The deadlines have been set. The departments have turned it in. Now what we're doing is getting them in our system and ready for y'all to come back together to do your peer review and do the same process we've been for the next couple of years. So long story short, it'll be next year before those things get back up and started, and it'll be according to what is approved through the capital item. Knowing that, here's what you need to understand for next year. So because of this year and because the financials are going to be a lot less than assumed, remember that next year for the 2021 budget, we're going to start off with a lot less beginning balance than what we would have. So we're going to have to look at those through the capital process, and this is what this group is for. Look at that and just understand that the priorities are there. Priority-based budgeting is a great process. I sell it all the time because there's a purpose for it. But especially in times like this, we're going to have to really understand the priorities and select priorities, because not all of it's going to be able to be funded, not by any means. So we'll do that July 10th, and I don't anticipate any of it being spent this year. In fact, I hope it doesn't get spent this year. Does that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Obviously, that crystal ball we've all talked about, we don't know between now and the end of the year what might happen. And obviously, if we have a good year and we get a lot more revenues in and stuff, then we can always relook at something based on what information we're better to see.
Yes.
And one benefit we all enjoy is Jamie being so conservative and keeping us on the better side of that fence.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm glad y'all are enjoying that.
But now I want you to know that Stan laid claim to being more conservative than Jamie.
Well, I love that. I've got some support. Yes. It kind of goes in waves.
Right now, we're very thankful.
I'm glad.
Project Director's Report.
So I have a couple of things on this today. One of the things I wanted to update you all with is we had a bond rating call. For those of you who don't know, I'm sure you all know what that is, but during this time of COVID, Standard & Poor's, S&P, sent us a list of cities that they downgraded because of the basis of the city. We were one of them. So whereas we were A stable, they reduced us to A negative without even reviewing anything. They started asking questions. They sent us a list of questions. I sent them our COVID report, which they were thankful for, which I was thankful that we had that, because it was able to help them answer a lot of their concerns. So we sent that. We answered all of their questions. And then we had a bond rating call with them a few weeks back. And I will just tell you that it didn't go well. And when I say it didn't go well, I asked them why they would just downgrade us just because we're a tourism-based city without even looking at our stuff. And they said, well, they don't do it very often. I asked them if it was a common practice, because I didn't think that that was right. So I asked him if it was a common practice and said, no, it's not a common practice, but given the state that the country is in, they thought it was what was best. The other question that I asked them is, okay, well, what can we do to get that negative turned back around to stable and even better? They said, well, it's going to take a couple of years. And that's depending on if they don't reduce us even further through this whole bond rating. Now, they've asked some really good questions, and I think we had some really great answers for them. Our reserves being healthy, they were thankful and happy with that. They were able to look at some of the things, and they told us that we were very prepared, so I was glad to hear that. But we did ask them some pretty frank questions, and one of those is, 2020, they said they would take another look at it after they could see 2021's financials, which means 2022. So their committee is meeting, let's say Thursday, I believe today, to decide if we're going to stay at an A negative or if they're going to reduce us even further. So we are hopeful that at least we stay at an A negative. I am not happy with that. I think we need to be stable and higher. But because the fact that we're over 80% tourism, it gives them cause for concern. It gives the investors cause for concern. So they're meeting today. I'll let you know how it all turns out when I get the report. They typically send me a draft of the report. I go through it. Any questions that I have, we send it to them. They'll release a final report of which Stan, John, the whole board will get that too. So I just kind of wanted to let you know what was going on that side in case you saw anything, or we're in that process right now. But keep in mind, we can always ask for them to do another rating review, but it could go in our favor and it couldn't go in our favor. So if we're going to ask for that, we need to make sure that our financials are extremely stable and we've got some really good history behind us before we do that. Otherwise, she did tell us that it could be 2022 before we have another rating. So depending on what comes out of that committee today, I will let y'all know and share that with you. What that means in terms of the city finances and those kind of things. We have some large projects coming up that we were going to need to go to the market for. If they reduce us to a triple B, that doesn't bode in our favor, and it's going to be higher cost to borrow the money, and it's going to be less investors interested in that. So it's going to be a little bit more difficult to be able to get what we need. So just understand that. I just kind of want to give you a baseline of what we were up against here, and just to be completely transparent on what we're dealing with. And we probably won't find out until next week, but I just want to give you a heads up on that. Okay. The next thing is, we did take the modification before the board, the loan modification for our energy performance, before the board on Tuesday night. Just really quick to go over that with you. It's an $85,000 saving and a reduction of 3 years off of the debt. So there's great news. They didn't want to do a double read. However, I talked to the bank yesterday and they were willing to extend their offer. And so we're going to come back to the board for a second and final read on the 14th. And hopefully we can move forward and get that modified. Then that debt will be paid off in 2023 and we'll save $85,000 over that debt issue. So that was a good news. Also, one of the other things I wanted to bring up to you is we took it before the board. We had our West 76 properties approach and ask us to help us with the relief of some of their base percentage to the tune of 12%. We talked with Stan yesterday that we are putting together some options, 4 options, I believe, just really to run down those options. One of them is a 12% reduction off of the base. One of them is time extensions. Correct me, Stan, if I, 20, and then the other one is a combination of the two, do a time extension and a reduction. And then the 4th one is do nothing. So those are the options, and we're going to put together a packet and bring it before the board, but I wanted to let you know that because it's revenue driven, we'll have to work with Chris on how we can do that. One of the things of the concern is not really the base. I know that these properties are concerned about the base. The concern for me is the minimum amount required. So in these leases that we have, there's a base amount, Most properties, one property doesn't even have a base amount. There's a base amount, and then there's a percentage of gross receipts, but there's also a minimum required for them to pay the city. So you reduce the base amount, and obviously their gross receipts are going to be reduced. That minimum required is going to be challenging for them to pay. So, and while you look at that, certainly we want to help them, but the other side of it is we want to make sure that our general fund doesn't go below our COVID results, so it's a balancing act. So that's why we're going to present the options, and I want to try to somehow make the businesses aware, instead of just looking at that base, you got to look at that minimum required, because that is what I'm concerned about, and I've seen that. So just to keep you up to date, that's what's going on there, and we're going to present that before the board. And I think, budget timeline. The budget timeline, July 10th, is it everybody going to be able to make that meeting, if you don't mind letting us know, because that is the starting of the budget process. I think we always have a good time during that meeting, but that's the start. Yeah. That's the starting of that process.
What time are you thinking, Jamie?
Let me look real quick. Did we say a time? We didn't say a time, so what time works best for y'all?
How much time do you think it's going to take?
Oh, mercy. I would say at least 3 hours, if maybe 4.
That will cost you ribs there.
Well,
That's a
we
rib.
typically provide lunch for y'all too.
So we just keep showing up until you tell us otherwise?
Yes, as far as I know, the appointments will be made on the 14th for the citizen committees. Is that correct?
Yes, made
So-
public, yeah, and voted on.
There you go, July 10th.
I don't have anything scheduled.
Do you prefer,
Okay, okay,
you
okay.
prefer to start like at noon with lunch, a working lunch, and then go on through?
We could start at noon. That's what Stan just recommended. So noon and go through to 4:30, and we'll provide lunch. Don't know about ribs, but
Get
it
out
might be
notice.
a less costly item, but
Piece of bread, $5 footlongs right now.
I might make up some sandwiches with a loaf of bread, but
Ring bologna and pork and beans, right?
Oh, God.
All right. Jamie, anything else from your point?
nope, that was all I had. Thank you.
Obviously, we made some changes by combining the Budget and Finance Committee and the capital improvements, but felt like that both committees need to have a full financial picture to help them with their decision process. And I think this is going to be the best way for us to be able to do things. It also lessens one meeting in regard to staff primarily. Obviously, the rest of us are going to be here, but I think this is a good way for us to go, and it feels good. I appreciate the conversation and input. As already expressed, I appreciate the thoroughness of the presentation and the information that's given. This city has got lots of things going, but it also has lots of things that affect us. And we'll watch closely, and we'll try to predict the future best we can without having real knowledge of what's going to happen. And we'll try to do those things that help keep our citizens safe and do the things we're supposed to do for citizens, but also to look out for our tourists who come in and provide 83% of our income source for this community, which is so important. Thank you. Any other comments from the board, either from Capital or from Finance?
No, sir.
Take a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Motion been made, is second? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. We are adjourned.
Thank y'all.
Thank you. Jamie, you going to be in here for a minute?
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to holler about something real quick.
I thought sure the Goodall clan would